The Callisto Protocol has been one of the most exciting games to release in 2022. With the same great minds behind it who also made Dead Space, it was poised to be a competent game feeding the horror needs of many. It even has brutal and gory death scenes so intense they were banned in Japan. When a country that openly promotes child porn and incest says you're too heavy on the killing for them, you're doing a good job.
私、今なんでお兄ちゃんに脱がされて、拘束されて、挙句に押し倒されてるのか。
So when it comes to giving mature adults a mature game, they are not holding back. On the horror aspect, the game is not scary. It relies on jump scares often, and the enemies are not only generic looking, they're also not a threat. The scariest part of the game was accepting the terms of service without actually knowing what I was agreeing to. Beyond that, it is full of classic tropes with nothing new or refreshing. The environments range from small rooms and corridors to deceptively large outside areas while not being very dynamic. You'll venture through areas like the prison, a sewer, outside in the snow, underground caverns, the prison, and a literal ivory tower. The story is okay, but you can see where it's heading after the first 5 minutes. Characters are pretty par for the course, no real standouts or twists. I'm giving Callisto Protocol a 3 out of 10 for being very generic, having poor combat mechanics that are too repetitive, and being overpriced at $70 on PS5. From here on in, it's going to be spoilers, so you can keep watching if you don't care about that stuff. We start off following Danny walking through a street with dead bodies everywhere. As with real life, just because everyone is dead doesn't mean you can take your mask off. Only 2 genocides to flatten the curve. This takes us to our main character, Jacob, a pilot transporting medicine and Holocaust. His co-pilot, and assuming good friend Exposition, talks about things that seem weird with the cargo. Jacob brushes off his concerns as stupid and leaves to check out a hull breach. Discovering the USS Enterprise went rogue, he goes back to the cockpit and gets attacked by Dr. Fauci's henchmen. Refusing to put on a mask, Jacob ejects the imposters. Danny shoots the window to the pilot room and crashes the ship. Being a woman, she needed a mess to clean up. Jacob wakes up to find his co-pilot dying. Then he dies. Jacob gets taken away by security along with Danny to the famous Black Iron prison. Here we see Captain Ferris, the most interesting, well-written, and best-acted character in the game. Once inside Black Iron, Jacob gets implanted with a Fitbit to monitor his health. He wakes up in a prison cell and finds a glowing pink box on the floor. He then gets dream raped by his co-pilot. He wakes up in his prison cell and finds everything has gone to shit. From here, Jacob meets Jesse Smollett. He gives him a shiv and says something about the guard saying, "This is MAGA prison." You can now open the most unsecured prison doors ever created by cutting a ribbon cable. Jacob gets to the control room and opens Jesse's cell. He tells Jacob 2 white guys holding a noose and bleach went that way. Not wanting to get canceled, Jacob agrees to track them down, and one of the guards is Captain Ferris. Getting caught by his force pull, Ferris interrogates Jacob, and we get hit with some of the best dialogue delivered in the game.
Look at me when I'm talking to you. What'd you do? Huh? You can tell me. Are you different? Are you special? Why'd the warden want you alive?
Jacob opens the door to let in mutants, pinning himself in the corner behind the door. They tackle Ferris out the window, killing him. Jacob then continues to go find Elias. He meets up with Elias and gets a gun, then is told they need to get to the SHU to release a prisoner who can help them. At the SHU, Jacob opens a cell and gets sucker punched by Danny. She then locks him in a cell. Elias makes a plea needing Jacob for a pilot, but she doesn't trust him.
Don't trust him.
Jacob is now trapped in a solitary confinement, maximum security prison cell. It will be pretty tough to get out of this situation.
Actually, it's gonna be super easy. Barely an inconvenience.
Jacob pries open a box next to the door and cuts the ribbon cable. I hate this game. The door opens. Jacob sees the dome where he can use the tram to get to a hangar, then commandeer a ship to leave. To get there, he must follow a red pipe through a sewer to a large drain pipe that leads to the dome area. This also happened because it's not written by 12-year-olds. Once in the main drain, it turns into a totally serious and not goofy water slide. He then makes it to the dome and needs to lift the security lockdown to get to the tram. He gets to the security room and removes the lockdown. The only problem is, he takes a long way around and meets up with Elias. They need to go outside to get to the tram, Just as Jacob puts on the snowsuit, Captain Ferris reveals he's still alive. They get ejected outside and separated. Jacob finds Elias, and he's dying. Then he dies. Danny shows up in a vehicle. She takes out Elias's Fitbit and downloads the Google Map data off it. She then offers Jacob a ride, and they escape together. I'm kidding. She's a total bitch and leaves Jacob behind, telling him he needs to walk. After Jacob meets up with her, she needs help killing the mutants. After killing them, he opens the door to let her out, and they form a reluctant partnership. I doubt they will ever get along. They both open the main gate, and Jacob meets up with Danny on the Snowcat to drive to the hangar. She makes a stop at his ship to see what he was transporting. It was just medicine. They leave to the hangar, and the game then slow walks you and starts taking massive dumps in your ear. If you haven't opted for the sweet release of death, they make it to the rooftop and she uses the controls to remote the ship to them. The warden locks her out of the controls and opens a hatch on the rooftop. Taking way too long to realize what's happening, the ship gets shot down and Jacob falls off the roof. He grabs a light post and swings inside the building, waking up in an abandoned strip mall. He sees Danny, and after approaching her, she turns into his co-pilot. He wakes up, questioning his sexuality after having 2 wet dreams about a man. Danny is now in the tunnel with him. It was never explained how she got there or knew where he was. They need to go back to Black Iron Prison to confront the warden about the outbreak. On the way, Danny drops Jacob down a pit. I know an intentional drop when I see one, and that is not the face of regret. Jacob wakes up to a new type of mutant, a blind one. Evolving to not have eyes, a poor sense of smell, and average human hearing is the pinnacle of evolution.
Yes.
He cuts himself down and has to turn the power back on by starting a generator. Now he can use the transport to get to the colony to meet up with Danny. After finding Danny, he disconnects her without using the safe eject, causing her to lose a memory about who Jacob is, and she attacks him. The room they are in falls and Jacob blacks out. When he wakes up, Danny tells him how the same outbreak happened before and everyone was killed to contain it. Danny finally gets what she deserves when a mutant chucks her against a wall. After killing the mutant, the walkway collapses and Jacob falls. He meets back up with Danny and they leave the tunnels back to the outside. They see a large hazmat dome where they need to go. Once inside, find a large alien that is the source of the parasites. Jacob opens a box of medicine like he was transporting and discovers it was hiding vials of the parasites. Ferris shows up and Jacob escapes to a room with Danny, blocking out Ferris. Danny gets a face hugger on her face and is now infected. She wants to die. Jacob reminds her Canadian laws don't apply to space, so she has to at least make an effort to live. On their way to see the warden, they get ambushed by security robots and Jacob gets knocked out. When he wakes up, he needs to see a doctor. He most definitely has a concussion by now. The robot throws him into his prison cell and he talks to a doctor that has Danny. She opens his cell door and tells him to meet her in her lab. He stops the doctor from injecting Danny with something. She tells him it's an inhibitor to slow the mutation. He allows it. Then she connects him to Danny's core and starts downloading her memories. She gives him an injector, and he needs to mix it with the blood of the Alpha, Ferris. The doctor talks about the research she was doing, and Jacob pretends to understand. Him and Danny go to the tower where the warden is just as the download completes. He is taken to the streets from the beginning of the game and sees his dead co-pilot again. After a warm embrace and a few tears, his co-pilot shows Jacob the pink box was actually one of the vials containing the parasite. Jacob realizes why Danny hates him, and that's all we get out of this revelation. Jacob finds the warden talking to some guys via Zoom meeting. He explains to Jacob that he is trying to make humans better by being able to survive in space. Ferris shows up and gets killed by Jacob. Jacob uses the injector on Ferris and creates an antidote, then uses it on Danny. The reactor is set to self-destruct and the warden is just a hologram. Jacob and Danny get to an escape pod, but there is only one, so he gives it to her. She escapes and thinks Jacob died. Jacob lived and the reactor stopped self-destructing. Then Ferris shows up. And that's the end of the game. So overall, what I liked about the story, Elias was a fun character. I enjoyed the banter between him and Elias, and I thought he was very well developed. It was very upsetting when he died, and I really did miss him throughout the rest of the game. Captain Ferris was also another great character. He was played very well, the lines were delivered very well, and he was someone that I loved to hate. For the negative, Danny was just a terrible character. She was very by the numbers. Nothing about her character development was out of the ordinary, and it was very straightforward. Too many jump scares, not enough substance. A lot of things happened in the game, and then it didn't foreshadow anything. It didn't lead to anything. It was just there for a quick boo, and then forgotten. A very by-the-numbers story, no twist or surprises, just very boring. You already know where it's leading to. And the way it ends the same way as the original Dead Space. That was a big letdown. As for the combat, it was very repetitive, relied way too heavily on the baton, and there wasn't enough gunplay. Needing the enemies to get close to you was something that took out a lot of the fear factor. There was no reason for experimenting with different weapons. You just really needed the baton and pistol combo, and you can really kill anything. All enemies, excluding leeches and bombers, were fought the same way. This goes from the runners to the tanks, spitters, even boss fights. Even the main boss fight. There was no reason to change up your strategy, no reason to switch a gun out. It was just the same thing over and over and over. If you can pick up the game for $20-25, it'd be a good deal. The $60, $70 that they're asking for now, it's a total ripoff. So that's all I got. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.